It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome. He is Gary McNamara. I'm Eric Harley. It's a Monday, kids. Gary, how are you?
I'm doing good.
All right.
I mean, it was a crazy weekend. I mean, just absolutely nuts.
Yeah, it was.
This is the one that gets to me the most, though.
All right.
Because this was just this. When I heard this the other day, it was like, we're doomed.
Yeah.
We are absolutely doomed. And this was where the White House economic advisor seemed to be completely clueless on monetary policy. Now, he was Jared Bernstein, who chairs the White House Council of Economic Advisors, was interviewed for a new film called Finding the Money. Now, it's a documentary made by advocates of the modern monetary theory.
All right.
Now, one of their central tenets is that government budget deficits don't matter for countries like the United States that borrow money in their own currencies. Proponents argue this means the government should use tax and spending policy to manage the economy and address inflation instead of the central bank's monetary policy. All right?
Mm-hmm.
They're completely wrong. All right, number one. But that's not the point. That's not the point that, they say the government should use tax and spending policies to manage the economy. That's insane. They should now, unless they're saying they shouldn't tax as much and their spending should be less, yes. But they seem to be talking about the fact that taxing and spending, it doesn't matter whether we borrow or not. That the borrowing doesn't affect, because we can print our own money and therefore everything is okay.
Yeah, it seems to be some kind of new Keynesian economics theory.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that isn't even the point. The point was I'm just going to play it. We'll just play it because you hear it and you're just like, and at the end he goes, so it gets, I'll just play it because it's bizarre. Here we go.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language that some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds.
Okay, now he's simply repeating what she said.
He's
not
he
answering.
started off a lot like Karine Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, he's not answering any question. It's simply saying, it's like, there's protests going on that are anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. Well, we know, and I've talked about this many times before, there are protests going on that some people view as anti-Semitic, but the protests that are going on are protests that are defended by the First Amendment of the United States. Unless they get violent, then they're not, but the protests are something that we recognize that are going on.
Uh-huh.
Well, thank you for answering my question. By answering what, in my question, was the statement.
Yeah.
But here we go. Let's continue it.
Is that what they do? They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Like, because it's like the government clearly prints money. It does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
This is why. This is why when we find cocaine lying around the White House, we don't immediately blame Hunter. Right there.
Oh, my God.
And tell me they haven't found weed.
Oh, my God. We are so screwed. This is the lead economist advising the President of the United States.
We've been asking since the beginning, who the hell's in charge?
No idea how it works.
Tell me who in their post is actually in charge. Tell me who. Anthony Blinken? No. Austin? No. In fact, Austin's not always even there.
Well, here's the thing. Do I have anything written here?
No, as far as I know.
Nothing written here.
Nothing up your sleeve.
I'm holding my hands up in the air.
Yes.
That's an easy question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, you just can't print unlimited money. You can't tax and spend. You can't tax and spend yourself to success. And the fact is, the government should not be printing money to buy our own debt.
No,
because that's part of the cause of inflation. Because we're adding money, not because we're producing more goods and services in the economy. But what we're doing is we're just printing money for the sake of printing money in order to help keep the interest rate down. Because that's competition against anybody else who wishes to buy a treasury bill or a bond. And so we shouldn't be doing that. And we should not be spending as much money as we are, because as you see, the policies has created the inflation that we see today. So it isn't. This is a whole thing. This is a whole thing that you get, especially from the left, that the American dollar is a fiat currency, that nothing backs it up. Therefore, you need gold.
Right.
Well, that's inaccurate to begin with. The U.S. currency is judged by the International Monetary Exchange, which is a look at the entire economy. Now, the debt and the interest rate of the United States and taxpayer dollars having to be taken out of productive purposes and going to the government, that helps hurt an economy when that happens, because you don't have money in productive purposes. But the fact is, to sit there and say we could just print as much currency as we want and would have no effect, does he not go back to World War II Germany?
Yeah, right.
And what happened?
Yeah.
You just can't keep printing currency. But this is the whole thing. But he clearly has no idea how the economy works. We've said this before, that it's really an embarrassment in the United States where we run, these politicians get in, throw slogans in. They throw damn slogans in. And people go, oh, yep, that sounds good. Oh, that's how we run an economy. And they have no freaking clue how it even runs.
No, they don't.
None.
No, they don't.
And it's an embarrassment. And they're setting the monetary policy in the United States. All the inflation that you see today, we could go back. They did last week. I think the RNC went back last week and said, now they're trying to soft sell inflation again. Let's see what they said from the very beginning. Every single economic advisor to the president, every single Democratic economic advisor was 180 degrees wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go past 100%. They were completely and totally wrong. And this idiot gets up there and shows, I have no idea. I am the lead economic advisor to the President of the United States, and I can't answer a simple damn question about the American dollar and why it has worth and why you just don't borrow endless amounts of money.
He was worse than Karine Jean-Pierre. At least she brings a book of answers. This guy was clueless.
Just absolutely clueless. What an embarrassment.
I mean, is everybody there a DEI hire? That's what it seems like to me.
So
tell me who is qualified. Who has shown that they're qualified? There's not one of them. Not one of them. I mean, seriously. Okay, If you had given that answer on a game show, you would have lost the first question. You would have been out round one. You would have been done. This is basic stuff that his chief economic advisor should know.
It was pointed out that again he has he doesn't have an economic degree. Graduated with a bachelor's degree from the Manhattan School of Music. He was a jazz player. Earned a master's of social work from Hunter College, as well as in social welfare from Columbia University School of Social Work.
Social welfare. Yeah. Again, these are all hires as a part of the agenda. They're all activists.
Yep.
They don't have to know what they're doing because the agenda is the only thing that matters to them.
You put completely clueless people in there.
That is shockingly bad. That's frightening and should be to everybody.
Now, I don't know when that interview was done. I know that, you can check. In 2018, he opened a public dialogue with the proponents of modern monetary theory, a branch of economics that's outside the mainstream. And, but I have no idea. He didn't answer any question there. There was no question that was answered.
Well, it sounds like he couldn't even complete a sentence.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the full interview, and I can't find it yet. But just that itself showed how clueless he is.
Wow. Tell me we're not doomed.
Well, we are led by a nation of idiots. Well, it's the same thing that people... I got to get to this very quickly. So I opened Facebook yesterday, and I get along with all my neighbors. My neighbors I get. And most of them know what I do. I don't know if they pay attention. I don't, people, you don't know. But one neighbor, one of my neighbors, and I've got lots of neighbors. This one, but her family. This goes back a couple of years ago. I remember I was out of town. Went to visit my buddy Jerry Memorial Day, or it was 4th of July that year in Tampa. Came back like on the 4th of July. This family's holding right down the street's holding a little block party, and I get out of I go to check my mailbox. I go, Gary, come over, come here. I go over there, and they say, you got to meet this guy. And I met this guy, and it was a relative of their family, and he was like, we weren't even red eye yet. We were still, I think, Midnight Radio. We weren't even with Westwood One yet. And this guy was the biggest fan of the show. He goes, do you know who this guy is? So this family all knows who I am.
Right.
Now, I know that during the whole Black Lives Matter thing, they had that out in front of their house. Well, so I figured, okay, somebody in the house is liberal. I didn't sense that everybody was. Well, she comes out yesterday with a Facebook page. I want everybody to listen to the Robert De Niro interview about Trump and listen to it to the end. You need to hear what he has to say. And if any one of my Facebook friends is even thinking of voting for Donald Trump, unfriend me now. Like, whoa.
Well,
so I did. I mean, I fulfilled her request. And if she asked, because I know she pays attention to my page, I go, well, I always do what women tell me.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if she says, well, what do you think? I go, well, what do you think? You're telling me what De Niro thinks. He's a nutcase.
He's a guy who lies for a living. Yeah,
you tell me what you think. Worst thing is when somebody says, somebody puts up, that's, and the other thing is when she did that, I went, she's completely clueless. This is all emotion. And I'm just like, I could blast her here. I'm not going to do it. There's no reason to do it. And
no, she made a request, and you did the neighborly thing.
But she just absolutely just lost it. It's like, okay, didn't even answer, just, and it only got like one like from another neighbor I know who used to live there, who moved, who was just so far wacko liberal. And that was it. There was no other comments, and it was on there for over 24 hours when I saw it. I'm like, wow. I'm sure some of the neighbors went, I don't think so.
Right.
I think most of them ignored it, and I went, I'm not going to ignore it. She's asking a request, and so, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Do the neighborly thing.
But I know she's clueless. You know, huh?
Mm-hmm.
When anybody says, watch this, and if you're still going to vote for Trump, when you sit there and you project to somebody else and say, and especially somebody who's unhinged, like De Niro.
Yeah.
De Niro's completely unhinged.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't say, this is what I think. I know you're clueless. I've done this long enough.
Right. You got your political opinion from a video of a guy who lies for a living.
Yeah. He's a nut. He's a nut.
If you can't form your own opinion, then I don't know what to tell you.
But I had to mention that. Oh, and by the way, I got to mention also that my great nephew just a couple of weeks ago picked up high jumping. Said, I think I'll high jump.
All right.
Won the district meet.
Nice.
It was against men.
Oh, okay. Okay, yes.
I got to tease him on that one.
Yeah.
It was so funny because I saw them like, well, he's not been high jumping. They said he just picked it up a couple of weeks ago. He won the district against everybody.
Nice.
And the way he did it, I mean, I put it on Twitter. You can see it on Twitter. You see him. It's like, that's really good form. But my sister told me, she goes, yeah, but his first jump, he didn't have the form. but he cleared it. He won.
But that was so 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I know, but it was, and so it was like, wow, that's just.
I mean, to pick it up that quickly,
but I
do that well.
But I have to tease him publicly. But when I talked to him, he said, "Don't you do a radio show or is it a podcast? Could you mention that on the air for me?" And I said, Not only will I do that, but I'll put it on X.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll put it on X and Facebook so everybody can see it.
Well, good.
He was so proud.
Well, congratulations.
Well,
great job.
What I like is the fact that he plays basketball and team sports, and I've been trying to get him to do something where he is. I have no influence on him doing this, but I've always said you need to try something that's individual.
Yeah, sure.
You need to branch out a little bit, try other things.
Yeah.
866-90 Red Eye.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. Logging miles during the hot summer months can put a serious strain on you and your truck's health. Did you know pollutants and allergens in the air outside can enter your cab through the HVAC system without you even cracking a window? That's why it's important to check those cabin air filters. Not only do dirty cabin air filters contaminate the air you breathe, they can also cause major damage to HVAC components like blower motor resistors and AC compressors. Have your cabin air filters serviced if you notice less airflow than usual coming from the interior vents. This is a common sign that your filters are at the end of their life cycle. Breathe easy when the air in your cab is fresh.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Wow, even the liberal media was covered that the anti-Israel pro-terrorist protest funded by all big Biden donors.
Yeah. When that started to roll out, it seemed like Friday. It really started to gain momentum after we left here. There was a police officer involved in what happened in New York at Columbia, saying he had no doubt whatsoever this thing was highly organized and well funded. And you look at the nature of like all of the posters that they had, the leaflets that they had, that they were passing around with instructions and everything else. I said, no, this was heavily organized. Nothing new to us, but interesting that the liberal media was kind of waking up to it.
Yep.
Soon, they'll be going into a deep dive. Make time. Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. So this is coming out now. It's going to make the Republicans investigate it more and be pounding on this week. CNN did. Here's Jake Tapper with top Biden advisor Mitch Landrieu over the weekend.
Politico has a story out this morning noting that a lot of the multimillionaires and billionaires funding the most explicitly anti-Israel groups, ones that think Israel has no right to exist, that are active on campuses, that these groups are funded by big Biden donors, the Pritzkers, the Gateses, George Soros, David Rockefeller Jr. Should they stop funding these groups? Are they causing unrest for the American people?
Well, let me say this. I think that everybody, as the president has said, needs to kind of get focused in on the very core principles of what our Constitution allows and what our Constitution protects. And that is this. Everybody has a right to protest, but they have to protest peacefully. If they're protesting violently, that has to end. There's no place for that. There's no place for anti-Semitism. There's no place for Islamophobia.
That's not the point.
I haven't heard a stall like that since I tried to start my first car. It's garbage.
Just they can't answer any question. And that's good. The Republicans are going to pound on that. It's Biden donors. And that's one of the other points that you can make. Now, we understand, because when you think about this now, the other thing that if that story is true, the one that came out that the United States, now the report came out that the United States stopped last week giving Israel arms. Mm-hmm. Everybody has not commented on it. Nobody will say whether it's true or not.
Right.
And so that's, and so Republicans are going to go crazy about that this week. And also the fact of it's all Biden donors. The biggest Biden donors are the ones funding the pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, violent protesters at these campuses.
Mm-hmm. And he also forgot to mention the Colonel with his wee bitty eyes when he was going through the list and he came to the Rockefellers. And then the Colonel with his wee bitty eyes.
About that one, yeah.
It's not anything new to us, for those of us who have been paying attention for years. We have seen these radical protests over the years be funded by, and I mean well-funded, by far-left people. Remember back in when we saw the whole Ferguson thing go down? Well, local and state officials were saying a number of these people aren't even from this area or this state. So how did they get there? Well, tell me that in a time of high inflation, that all of these protesters can afford to be so organized. Either mommy and daddy are doing it or somebody else is doing it. Well, when you add in the organization of it all and how it was all carried out, yeah, it reeks of a number of individuals with a lot of money. And these organizations, the organization of such events happens online. They've seen it. Authorities have seen it over and over again. We talked earlier about I mentioned the flyers that one law enforcement official said, look, in his opinion, there's no way this wasn't well-funded and well-organized. This was way too clean.
Oh, yeah.
For it not to be. Well, forget about the flyers even. If you've got a smartphone, you know exactly where to go. If you've got any social media, the right social media page, you know exactly where to go.
Wall Street Journal, pro-Palestinian encampments trained for months. Now, understand that's from the Wall Street Journal news division, which is more liberal.
Right.
Then you have Politico mocked for being surprised on who is funding the anti-Israel protest. Now, the Gates Foundation has disputed the Politico report. Understand, again, Politico is not a conservative publication.
Right.
They are a very liberal publication.
Right.
A spokesperson for the Gates Foundation has no active grants to the Tides Foundation, has never given grants to the Jewish Voice for Peace and the If Not Now organization. They also said the Gates Foundation has not donated to President Biden. The Political Report headline, pro-Palestinian protesters are backed by a surprising source, Biden's biggest donors, was panned online Sunday for finally acknowledging what others had reported months ago. This is actually the least surprising thing we have heard all year, said the Libs of TikTok creator, wrote on X. Glad you guys could make it, Washington Free Beacon reporter Joe Simonson quipped. Republican Alabama Senator Katie Britt said, a completely unsurprising source. Representative Jim Banks, Republican of Indiana, surprising to who? The journalists of Political apparently are the only people on the planet surprised by this, said Spectator contributing editor Stephen Miller wrote. There is only surprising if you're brand new to following Democratic money or politics, GOP communicator Matt Whitlock replied. So then they go on and on and on saying, what is going on? But they can't answer the question. Mitch Landrieu wasn't prepared to answer the question.
No.
And when they're not prepared to answer the question, they simply repeat, or they do the thing that we see all the time, which, by the way, we still, and thank you for people that love the analogy because you hear it all the time. Okay, these protests that were unlawful that happened at these campuses were anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism, pro-terrorist, the elimination of Israel all being promoted. What do you have to say about it? Well, the president and I, we always defend the right to protest legally under First Amendment rules, but if you don't follow the rules or the laws, then that is bad. That wasn't the question.
No, it's like they're addressing a totally separate question every time because they can't step into this. There is no way to look good taking this whole thing on.
And I thought of a couple of other analogies. The one that we used last week was, so what do you think about the bank robbery that happened here? Well, we need to know that there's nothing wrong with people going in to a bank and taking money out of their own checking account with the proper ID. Now, when it gets to the point of bank robbery, then that's wrong. Yeah, we know that. What does people...
Even having a gun inside of a bank, if you're a security guard, is allowed, and we all know that. I mean, seriously,
right.
They try and walk down this road to bring up another conversation. They're killing time. Why would you even pause to take any questions from the media? Just say no comment. Move on.
Yeah. Or I was thinking the other day, so we know that you committed fraud in this election. We know your party committed fraud. Why did your party commit fraud? Well, first off, what you need to understand is we are all for voting legally. We're not talking about voting legally, and we're not talking about protesting legally.
Yeah.
We're talking about trespass. As far as I know, trespassing, assault, blocking students from school, from going to classes, shutting down a campus, from what I know, that has nothing to do with the First Amendment, so why are they bringing it up?
Yeah.
Because they can't defend it.
You see all these things that are clearly unlawful, unless you're Alvin Bragg. Alvin Bragg has to qualify at first. Okay, who did you support? Who do you support? Which side do you support politically? Because if you support Trump, then everything's illegal. But if you support Democrats, none of that, which is clearly illegal, is illegal.
So you have the biggest donors now. Understand, because we need to understand, this is coming from them. As well, this is coming from the left. The biggest Biden donors are the ones that are funding the insanity and the pro-terrorist mindset in the United States, which then makes you answer the question, why doesn't Biden criticize them immediately or say we're not going to take that funding anymore?
Because he's too busy funding the actual terrorists directly.
The other point is the college outreach arm of the Democratic National Committee voiced solidarity, complete solidarity with the pro-terrorist protesters at campuses across the country. When we say this, I got a couple of emails last week from Democrats. It's like, you guys are lying. You guys are lying. Because we talk about identity politics leading right to this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are we lying about? And by the way, in the one email I got, there wasn't, when you accuse me of lying or Eric of lying, please have the courtesy to say what the lie is.
Right.
We understand that we're still going through, for example, a Trump trial in New York where nobody can identify what the crime is.
Mm-hmm.
We understand that's the Democrats' apparently new narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, going through Sunday morning news shows, even went to Shannon Breen on Fox, and they're discussing the testimony last week, and I just shut it off.
As if this whole thing is legit.
Yeah. Because any of the testimony they were talking about, nothing is, and then they talked about the Trump did that. Doesn't matter, none of it's illegal. You're basically, you're not doing good by discussing those particular issues unless the premise is, here's what they said Trump did. This is not a crime.
Nope.
There is no crime here.
Nope.
That's just falling apart big time. That falling up in the Hope Hicks.
Yeah.
First off, when I said Hope Hicks, I'm like, well, what's the soccer goalie? Oh, no, that's Hope Solo.
Yeah. Yes.
But it was like that was a disaster. One of the last questions, see where Andrew McCarthy, they asked the last question, which was, well, what did you have to do with business records? Nothing. Basically asking, why is she here? Why is this a witness?
Right.
This is a witness that was that apparently came across very sympathetic towards Trump, didn't know anything about any of this stuff. And it's like, this is what
had nothing to do with anything.
This is one of your major witnesses.
Right.
This is it. And so what do you have to do with business records? So I had nothing to do with that at all.
Right.
It's like, oh my God. It is, I don't know.
Pull it out of thin air. They don't care. The only thing they want is the display every day of him showing up to the courtroom. That's it. Bragg knows this thing's going to go away in appeal. But if he can make this thing go on long enough, it's like doing a daily perp walk, him walking into the courthouse. But the problem is you don't win this. It really is like the movie A Few Good Men getting Colonel Jessup on the stand. Except in that case, Colonel Jessup was actually guilty. Well, in this case, you're going after an ex-president, and he's got nothing. You actually going to go the full measure and pull the trigger? Well, they did. And now it's coming back on them. It's imploding. And along with everything else the current president broke, this is a bad time to be a Democrat.
By the way, Republicans, it's time to put out the slogan. We've been saying this how many months now? The Democrats and the president won't and can't fix anything because they cause the problems.
Mm-hmm.
So the Democrats, remember this, come on, Republicans, Democrats and the president cannot and will not fix any of the problems we are facing today because they caused the problems. This is what they want.
Yep. It's by design.
Let's get that out there and repeat that 8 billion times, Republicans.
Yep.
Don't be stupid this election season, Republicans.
Right.
It's not that hard, Republicans. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Oh, the insanity going on. I mean, it's all across the board here. We brought you a few just insane things in the first hour. Then I see this one, Wall Street Journal editorial page. An oldie. Well, this is actually going back to 2008, 2009. Okay?
Right.
Freddie Mac and its Biden regulator want to guarantee now second mortgages.
We never learn.
What could possibly go wrong?
It'll be fine. It'll be perfectly fine. Why not guarantee car loans?
Just love how they started. We'll get into more of this. Housing Godzillas, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, are threatening the countryside again, and better hide the children.
You can't hide the children. They got to pay for it.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the world, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. You know, I was doing a bunch of different things over the weekend, and I noticed that the world, with all the insanity in D.C., the world continues to run. You know, I was thinking about, the sporting events still continue to go on. There's, the hockey playoffs that are going on, the NBA. People are cheering and screaming. The Kentucky Derby the other day.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. Everything always keeps on moving. And it was one of those weeks last week where we were just dealing with the insanity, and all of a sudden the weekend hits and you're not dealing with the insanity just because you're doing normal things in life, and you're like, oh, well, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
This is the world still goes on. The private sector still goes on. The private sector still continues to be productive, but when it comes to what the problem is, and that's why we played the Jared Bernstein, the president's chief economic advisor, who has no idea how anything works. He made it clear in just that 2-minute segment that we played. He has no idea how economics works. Now, the Republicans have been pointing out that, well, but he doesn't have any type of economic training or degrees at all. His degrees are in music. It's like, why is he even there? Like, well, if he had an Ivy League economic degree, that might not mean anything anyway. It all depends where you stand on it. But you see that cluelessness out there. You see, the story, again, from the liberal media of Biden supporters, Biden donors, the ones that are supporting the anti-Semitic, pro-terrorist, unlawful protests at all these campuses. And they can't even deny it. President's campaign person, we played that, Mitch Landrieu, well, everybody has a right to free speech and the First Amendment. That's not the question.
Nope.
The question is, why are Biden donors? Is Biden's reaction because he doesn't want to take off his donors? And then you get to the story. I mean, and I never finished my thought last hour on this because it was just jumping from topic to topic. What happens is both you and I come in on Monday, and it's like there's too much. There's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday news.
I have to go out of my way to put myself back into Friday again. And that was 3 days ago. And it's a full day of things. And, it's a full news cycle there, a full news cycle on Saturday, and then the Sunday morning news shows and a full news cycle on Sunday. And, of course, any breaking news along the way. And it's like being out. Well, you've been out more than, half of a broadcast week.
Yeah.
You know?
And so when I saw, for example, I'm like, all right, we all know that Biden is the one by not continuing the Israelis, the Iranians from using their oil money, and Trump did. Trump kept them going, and Biden came and lifted the sanctions, and all of a sudden, this money is available to Iran to give to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others in order to attack American interests and attack Israel. So that happens. And then Biden immediately, and we knew this was going to happen, takes the pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic side and makes it clear. Says lies that, for example, what did he call it precisely? There were, I forgot when he talked about the attacks of Israel. What was the word that he used? I can't think of the name that he implied that is indiscriminate. That was it. Indiscriminate attacks. There's no indiscriminate attacks. Nobody's made that case. There's no genocide. The generals, when the generals testified, there was no problem I had with anything that they had said. I said, no, they're operating a war the way that they do it. We all know that the standards that we put on Israel have never been put on any other country in any other war.
Right.
And why are you doing it? And then we find out that, the same time, right after Congress passes aid for Israel, the report is out there that Biden is stopping American arms going to Israel while he enabled the money going to Iran and Iran's proxies to attack Israel. And then we find out through the liberal media, I mean, we knew it already, but it's highlighted now because if you knew it months ago, it didn't mean anything. It meant now that the unlawful protest happened. And now the liberal media promoting the fact that it's Biden's top donors that are financing the pro-terrorist unlawful protest at America's college campuses.
Yep. And the fact that they're waking up to that. By the way, fairly early on, if you think about it, this isn't like sometimes it happens where the liberal media looks back and says, oh, the lab leak theory, maybe that was a plausible theory, but it's 2 or 3 years later. This isn't like that. This happened, and it's really started to gain steam over the weekend on Friday. And I was like, all right, that's interesting. If they're looking at that, how is it that the Biden campaign doesn't see it and say, we're so screwed here? It's like his defiance is that you can't break it. He's trying to appease. We know what he's trying to do. But you look at the numbers, the majority of Americans don't side with him, but it doesn't matter. He's looking at these states, especially state by state, and thinking, well, I've got to get in with the radicals. I have to endorse the radicals. I have to do this politically to win. Are you that desperate to win? And the answer is yes. But then you go back to it and you say, okay, wait a minute. If he disavowed himself from the radicals, if he were to do that, which he's not going to do, then what would be next? Logically, the next thing would be reverse your own policy that you've been wrong about from the beginning.
Well, I'll give an answer as to why he's taking the position. Because his administration is anti-Semitic and pro-terrorist. And Joe Biden,
they're radical.
Joe Biden is an anti-Semite and pro-terrorist. When you abandon
his policy shows that.
The policy shows it, not anything that any Republican has said or not what I have said or you have said. It's the behavior of the White House. Remember, it was the hundreds upon, it was over 500 bureaucrats inside the Biden administration that immediately called for a ceasefire. Remember that? That's months ago. And then inside the White House, not just the bureaucrats, but the majority of the White House staff, the same thing. It's what they believe. Why? because they're the party that practices identity politics, where they judge people by groups and not individuals, and they believe in a party of victims and oppressors. And so they're always looking for new victims and new oppressors, even if they're not victims and oppressors. It's the logical end game of what we call 35 years of identity politics and racism of the Democratic Party, which started with conservative blacks, started with Clarence Thomas, went on in the late 80s, early 90s to all the conservative black talk show hosts out there, anybody who was a conservative black, and that continues today. So they don't care that they're in the minority. They believe racism, anti-Semitism is correct.
Yeah.
That's how immoral, evil people think. End of story. There's not really much more to discuss on it. Every Democrat listening right now knows that.
Yep.
Every Democrat listening right now knows that.
Yep. And it wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter what the Biden camp, what the Biden campaign or administration says. It's what they're doing. It's their policy.
Yep. Trying to walk this tightrope. Well, part of it's what's happening is the terrorism, but then part of it's Israel. What part's Israel?
Right.
What part?
Right.
Well, they're now allowing aid to Gaza. That's because it goes to Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
Hamas controls it. The Palestinian people. Oh, by the way, I didn't hear as much. Now, everybody takes a vacation, as we know, at the White House over the weekend, no matter what's going on. But I didn't hear as much pushing the, like Saturday into Sunday, pushing the Palestinian refugees.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't hear. I mean, it was there on Friday, and then it seemed to disappear, that nobody's really promoting it. And maybe that's because the mainstream media, I got to see if they brought it up on the Sunday morning news shows. They'll ignore that because they understand this is where you talk about censorship, but they will ignore a story like that because they know the American public does not want it. Why? Because the American public sees the polls and knows the majority of Palestinians agree that Hamas is correct. They don't want a solution with Israel. And that's the vast majority. It's like, was it 70, 75%? And that's those who have answered. I think it's actually more than that. And so that's the reality of what's going on over there. But he's trying to ride this tightrope. Whoa, there's good on both sides. That's pro-terrorist at this point.
Yeah.
The president is pro-terrorist. Tell us where we're wrong.
Yep. This policy clearly demonstrates it over and over again.
Well, everything. His behavior, his donors are the ones. They're all, as we said, they're all Democrat donors. They all want Biden to be elected, and they spend money for these protests that the people at the protest scream at Joe Biden, call him Genocide Joe.
Right.
And he doesn't know where to go because those same people that are funding the pro-terrorists are funding Joe Biden.
He'll never win their vote. It doesn't matter.
But his donors are still pushing that agenda, and so is Joe Biden. But he's trying to ride the tightrope, and it's not succeeding.
I got to wonder about those donors, too. What are they thinking? These kids, we're throwing money at these organizations or the organization of these protests, and we still can't buy their vote.
Yeah, but I think they're also like Joe Biden. I mean, they're trying to play the election game versus what they really believe. If they're donating to these groups, they're pro-terrorist, anti-Semites. They hate Jews. Otherwise, you don't donate money. You don't donate money that comes close to any organization like that.
Not a dime. Not a dime.
And that's why Politico were shocked by this. Why? Oh, by the way, I just love the head of ABC News resigning and saying, I have spent many years in the journalism business. No, you haven't.
No, you've been at ABC News.
What are you talking about?
You haven't. Not even close.
I want to play it again because it's worth playing it again. I want to play Jake Tapper with top Biden advisor Mitch Landrieu, and he brings it up about the anti-Israeli protester funded by big Biden donors.
Yeah.
Does he come out and say they're wrong? No. Here we go again.
Politico has a story out this morning noting that a lot of the multimillionaires and billionaires funding the most explicitly anti-Israel groups, ones that think Israel has no right to exist, that are active on campuses, that these groups are funded by big Biden donors, the Pritzkers, the Gateses, George Soros, David Rockefeller Jr. Should they stop funding these groups? Are they causing unrest for the American people?
Well, let me say this. I think that everybody, as the president has said, needs to kind of get focused in on the very core principles of what our Constitution allows and what our Constitution protects. And that is this. Everybody has a right to protest, but they have to protest peacefully. If they're protesting violently, that has to end. There's no place for that. There's no place for anti-Semitism. There's no place for Islamophobia.
They can't answer the question.
Nope.
Oh, the other one I liked. Elon Musk going after De Niro. Elon Musk came to the defense of Trump after Robert De Niro compared Trump to Hitler. That's so 2015.
Well, and after what the far left is doing now, you can't say
Right.
that.
Exactly.
The far left is the one calling for the defeat of the Jews and the elimination of Israel. Yet, and he was one of the, in terms of being a strong pro-Israel president, he's up there.
Because Elon Musk.
Trump, I mean.
Yeah, but Elon Musk here, what he said, well, Trump was actually already president for 4 years, and his policies bore no resemblance to those of Hitler, so this makes no sense. In fact, with the Abraham Accords, he made some progress towards peace in the Middle East, which was definitely not high on Hitler's agenda.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah, you want to talk about a pro-Israel president, you know, someone who has supported the Jews.
Right.
Well, Trump is right up there at the top and of all time in terms of that kind of policy and those kind of moves. That was a bold move.
It's there's humor in everything, even in the dumbest, stupidest, most evil things that are said. But genocide for the Jews, eliminate Israel. You people over there are a bunch of Nazis.
That's where we are.
That's where we are.
That's exactly where we are.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Independents with carrier authority should be mindful that negotiation strength varies as the week progresses. Typically, the highest rates across major segments are paid for loads negotiated on Sundays, and the highest volume of loads for all segments is seen on Mondays. Also, the weekday that tends to be the best for flatbed negotiations, yielding the best rates. Owner-operators tend to have less negotiation strength on Tuesday, which shows the lowest weekday spread between brokers' offered rates and actual paid rates. Broker offers tend to rise by Wednesday as the end of the week is in sight. This day also seems optimal for the 3 o'clock hustle, so-called for its reliance on that afternoon time of day, when brokers are getting nervous, to improve negotiation strength. Stay mindful of this system to maximize your revenue. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics. Brought to you by Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Look, it was another insane weekend. We'll get to all of it. Trump's New York trial continues, and it's just like every day I just shake my head. This story that you and I just went, what? Now the federal government remember 2008, 2009, or is that too long ago? Are we in the bubble of just the inflation today?
Yeah, I don't know how much history have we erased so far.
Yeah, so we'll get to it where Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the Biden administration is thinking of the federal government now not just guaranteeing first mortgages, but second mortgages.
Okay. All right.
And I just love the Wall Street Journal. What could possibly go wrong?
It'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be fine.
People.
There's not going to be a problem at all.
And Bill Maher, wow, saying what we said. Biden's loan plan is tax dollars supporting the Jew hating on campus.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh. Ooh.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Well, do you remember 2008, 2009 and the mortgage crisis, which was caused totally and completely by government manipulation of the mortgage market?
We remember it.
We remember it. We know that the left attempted to blame the banks. The banks would have never got into the business of any of the suspect loans that they did if the massive competition wasn't there from 40, 50% of the market from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac?
Yeah, take Fannie and Freddie out of the equation. You don't have the same scenario, not even close.
Right, doesn't exist. They created it. And now the editorial board, Wall Street Journal, and this story getting no play at all. I didn't hear any of this over the weekend except for their editorial. The return of the housing Godzillas. Now, we already said they need to get out of the mortgage business. Well, not only did they not get out of the mortgage business, what they're planning on doing now, or what they are now wish to do, is they want to guarantee federal guarantees of second mortgages.
Yeah.
I need a loan. Housing Godzilla's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are threatening the countryside again, and you better hide the children. It's not enough the taxpayers stand behind their $7.5 trillion in mortgages. Now Freddie wants taxpayers to back second mortgages, de facto consumer loans. What could go wrong? Higher interest rates have slowed the housing market and reduced cash-out refinancing following the pandemic boom. This has crimped the businesses of mortgage lenders. Fannie and Freddie, the government-sponsored enterprises that buy and guarantee home loans. At the same time, Americans are paying more to borrow for cars and other things. Enter Freddie, which wants to counter high interest rates by guaranteeing closed-end second mortgages. Similar to cash-out refinancing, second mortgages allow homeowners to tap equity in their homes. The big difference is homeowners don't have to refinance the entire outstanding loan at a new interest rate. As the Freddie and Fannie regulator, the Federal Housing Finance Agency explains, only the smaller second mortgage would be subject to the current market rate, as the original terms of the first mortgage would remain intact. Homeowners who bought homes or refinanced during the pandemic would not have to give up their uber low rates to tap equity, which means what? You're financing risky loans. And number two, who's paying that? That's coming from borrowed money from American taxpayers, is it not?
Yeah.
Where else is it coming from?
Yeah.
They offer the example of a homeowner with an original $150,000 loan and a current unpaid balance of $120,000. By the agency's calculations, he would save $136 a month and $112,000 in total interest by borrowing $30,000 with the second mortgage versus a cash-out refinancing. It gets better. Second mortgages typically carry lower interest rates than consumer loans, so borrowers could consolidate their auto and personal loans into a into a lower interest second mortgage. If Fannie were to guarantee the second mortgage, its implicit government backstop would further reduce their interest rates. Freddie and home lenders would profit from a new line of business. Consumers, at least the fortunate ones who bought homes before prices skyrocketed and have built up equity, would have more spending power. The Bank of America research team estimates that homeowners could extract about $1.8 million in equity if Fannie copies Freddie's idea.
Trillion.
What'd I say?
You said million.
Oh, trillion. That's more than 3 times as much as a $512 billion in outstanding second loans and home equity lines of credit. By increasing market liquidity, the GSEs would encourage more lenders to make second mortgages. As usual, the likely losers would be the taxpayer. One risk is that home prices fall, causing some homeowners with second mortgages to default. An equity buffer helps reduce defaults, which is one reason foreclosure rates remain near record lows. A reduction in equity would make defaults and foreclosures more likely. Former Democratic Representative Brad Miller testified in a 2015 hearing on the 2008 financial crisis that, quote, the subprime mortgage model was to lend to people who already owned their own homes. 70% were refinances and had a lot of equity in their homes, and the mortgages were designed to catch them in a cycle of borrowing and borrowing again. Jeez. He blamed banks for being greedy, but they were merely responding to the
Thank you, Wall Street Journal.
He blamed banks for being greedy, but they were merely responding to incentives created by the government and Fannie and Freddie. In order to compete,
Yep.
they went into giving loans that they had no business doing because the government was manipulating the damn mortgage market.
It's what we have been saying from the beginning of all of this. Without Fannie and Freddie, this wouldn't have happened.
If Fannie and Freddie buy and guarantee second mortgages, this will also create new risks in the financial system. If homeowners with higher credit scores consolidate their consumer loans into second mortgages, risky borrowers would make up a larger share of bank portfolios.
Yes.
Banks would then hold fewer high-performing loans to offset losses from that default, which would increase the risk of failure. And guess who stands behind the big banks? The taxpayer.
Yep. You know, in September of 2003, it was then Treasury Secretary Snow testifying on Capitol Hill, telling lawmakers Fannie and Freddie can't sustain what's going on here. And Barney Frank at the time said, oh, no, the problem is we don't have enough of these types of loans. You need to go out and ramp it up, actually increase those types of loans. It's like saying, again, look, there's a hole in your tire in terms of the bad paper versus good paper and that whole thing. There's a hole in your tire, but the majority of your tire is fine. It's just a tiny hole. And they said, well, if we get the right mix of paper in, increase these loans and increase that ratio, it'll all work out in the end. In fact, what happened in the end was a result of the beginning where they started with it all, but also ramping it up after 2003. This is exactly why we have to repeat things over and over again. We know our longtime listeners, sometimes you may get tired of it, but you have to, because people forget very easily. I mean, I'd love to see a poll of how many people know exactly how it went down. I mean, the liberal media, The Big Short, the movie, The Big Short. Well, you cover one half of it, and man, it sounds like you nailed it. Well, you missed out the biggest part of it. You started on the wrong premise. You started on halfway through the equation like the left often does. Yeah, Wall Street went crazy. It was a massive bailout for Wall Street. It was a massive bailout for a lot of people because it was the implied backing of the U.S. government. Take Fannie and Freddie out of that equation, none of it would have happened. And now we're back to not only doing that, and by the way, there's plenty of products on the market right now on first mortgages that are insane, we shouldn't be doing, and are backed by Fannie and Freddie. And now the talk of backing a second mortgage.
Federal government should not be involved in mortgages. And what would happen? People would live in newer, smaller homes.
You would borrow what you could afford.
There's a reason, because people remember, let's get back to the good old days. Well, the good old days was the middle class lived in a 1,000-square-foot home.
Yeah.
An 800 to 1,000-square-foot home.
You and I both talked about it. My dad and I were talking about their first home in San Antonio. I'd said earlier that I thought it was around 1,300 or 1,400 square feet. It was a little over 1,000 square feet, 1,050, I think, square feet. Their first house that he bought after coming home from the Vietnam War, they decided it was time to buy a home. And it was a small home, great home. I remember it fondly. And it was what my parents at that time could afford. And it was a lot of money back then, but it was what they could afford. And you and I talked about this over and over again. And what did we see inevitably after the crash? Then you had home builders go, oh, well, now we have new models that we're presenting so that people can buy smaller homes that they can afford. Yeah. That's the only way it should have ever happened. In an organic situation, lender and borrower sitting across from each other, the borrower has to prove themselves to get that kind of cash. That's the way it's always been, and everyone knew it. And you have to live up to it, which means you've got to have some teeth in the game to begin with. And so we went with this zero down garbage, and then low interest rates, and then on top of that, what did you have? You had insane products like the Nina, no income, no assets. Prove you're breathing, and you get a loan. Negative equity mortgages, where your interest is actually every month adding to your principal amount of your loan. The principal of your amount of your loan is actually growing every month under that product. It became insane because they were creating all of these. I mean, they came up with some unbelievable, freakish kind of loans that everyone knew was wrong, and it didn't matter. Hey, man, all you college boys, get on that jet. You go to Vegas, spend and gamble as much money as you want, and when you come back, we'll replace everything you lost.
Yeah.
And that's Fannie and Freddie. Take Fannie and Freddie out of that equation because, it always starts with this noble idea. We want people out of the lower income areas. We want them out of the urban areas. We want them to have the American dream and everything else. All sounds noble, doesn't it? Except for the fact is this: who can afford it? And each individual borrower is responsible for it. And we're not all cut out equally. It depends on our job history, our income, how much money we have to put down. Are we going to have teeth in the game? You know how many people walked away after 2009? They just walked away from their house. They didn't have any teeth in the game whatsoever. If you didn't put any money down at the close of that loan and never made any payments, well, of course you could just walk away from that house. You didn't care.
Do you remember?
But ultimately, it destroyed their credit.
Yep.
But they didn't care.
And do you remember where it was like, well, we need to put something in jail because these agencies were giving great credit ratings to these bundles that were worthless.
Right.
And we said, nobody's going to go to jail because what they're going to find out is all those rating agencies took those bundles of loans and said, oh, yeah, these are safe loans because the American government was backing it.
Right.
It didn't matter whether the loans were bad because of the backing of the U.S. government.
Right. And everyone could see it then, and they still see it now. That nobody cares about the taxpayer money that we have to pile on over and over and over for these types of programs. Virtually nobody today cares, our audience not included, and us conservatives, we're concerned about such things, but the world knows that nobody else is, and politically you can get away with it. So the American government can just back it endlessly and push these things through, and it's maddening that we're back here again talking about it. But of course we are, because if we don't care about the national debt, then why wouldn't we welcome such an insane idea from Fannie and Freddie?
866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Coming up, the Trump trial. Where's it going? Nowhere. But
Yeah,
just
right.
it's amazing. And like I said, when I even turned Fox News on this, with Shannon Breen, and they were talking about the testimony there, I was like, "You're wasting your time. The testimony's got." Now I understand what she was saying. That Hope Hicks was not a great witness for the prosecution. But the fact is, even if she was a great witness for the prosecution, she would be stating something that isn't a crime.
Right.
And that's the thing over and over again. It's like, well, I don't care what I don't. I don't care what the testimony is, because none of the testimony leads to what a possible crime is that Trump committed. So I don't care.
Right.
I'm like, click, don't care,
Yep.
don't care. Now I pay attention and I read, I do read more of what's going on, but I can't hear them discussing it. It drives me.
Well, no, I mean, it's like they're discussing some kind of legitimate crime here, and quite often, and that's just not the case, and that's the way they've covered this from the beginning.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the planet, we are Red Eye Radio. Good morning. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. How's everybody doing? Well, I guess I was looking at some of the commencement ceremonies that the pro-terrorist, demographic attended some of them. Most of the graduations went on. Even with the interruptions. And my first thought was, wow, colleges get out early.
I know.
That was my first thought.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. It's just the first weekend of May.
Yeah,
What really?
what's going on here?
I think we went to like May 15th, and then high school for me, we started later. I mean, Texas, they start school in August. You don't start until after Labor Day when I was growing up in New York, so we went to middle of June. When I got to college, it was like middle of May. It was like, wow, this is great. Then I realized I was paying for my college, and I wanted to learn as much as possible, so the time span of when classes took place was not as much of a concern to me since I was paying for it.
Yeah.
But just looking at some of the polling here, and a lot of hype and hoopla over the ABC News poll. This is a time of the year during a campaign where we start saying, all right, the pollsters need to start moving to likely voters.
Yeah.
Because registered voters is one thing, but the ABC News poll was all Americans. Wasn't even registered voters or likely voters. It was all Americans.
Right.
Now, I will say this, Biden got the lowest approval that he's gotten in a long time, 35%, and disapproval was 57%. But the fact that Biden was beating Trump in some of those demographics as to, who would win in some states and, who would win the overall vote. That's where I look at it. And that's where I think you see more disparities is with all voters. Excuse me, all adults, even those that don't vote.
Mm-hmm.
And the only poll, I'm looking at every single poll going back to the middle of the month, and this is ABC News, Rasmussen, Economist, YouGov, Harvard Harris, NPR, PBS Marist, CNN, Quinnipiac, Monmouth, Emerson, Daily Cause Civics, NBC News, Reuters, and Yahoo. 2 of them are all adults. Every single one except Rasmussen is registered voters. Rasmussen is likely voters. Now, the likely voter poll, which is the latest poll, shows a spread of minus 19 and disapproval rating of Biden with 59 and approval rating of 40. ABC News had his disapproval at 57 and his approval at 35. But it's, you look, and then the other thing you have to consider is, how do they take the poll? Right now I look at most of the polls that are taken. Most of the polls that I see have it almost a third, and a third. And from what I've seen, independents rank closer to 40% than 33 and a third. But that's just what I see. I look at that as, possible problems with all of these, with so many of these polls.
Right.
Now, Rasmussen is the daily rolling average now. They're doing it all the time now. And they have it, you look at it here and, it's not good. You have strongly approved for the president, 22%. Strongly disapproved, 49%. That's where they get the approval index of minus 27, which is one from the highest over the last month, which the highest has been 28 and 27.
Yeah.
So, but total disapproval, 59%, total approval, 40%. So that's where we are in the polls. But just wanted to bring that up. We believe you get more of an idea of what's going on when all of the pollsters go to likely voters. But so far, only Rasmussen is doing that. And a lot of times when it's head-to-head, you don't see that until September and October. Trying to see here, looking at all the different pollsters going all the way back, all the way to, oh, wow. Okay, this goes back a lot. This goes back as far as the presidency. But I go back a couple of months, and the only likely voter polls are the New York Times Siena poll that was beginning to mid-April, and Rasmussen. Yeah. New York Times is running the likely voter poll. Not the numbers that Rasmussen has, but still their spreads for the New York Times. Going back to February, as high as, minus 21. And you look at the latest for ABC was minus 22, Rasmussen minus 19. So the president's polling numbers are horrible. I just wonder what is the methodology, and are you actually undercounting the number of independents? And the other thing that I wonder about the polls, for example, a likely voter poll. Well, a likely voter poll for a Republican may be greater right now than a likely voter poll for a Democrat who is disenfranchised, yet fits the definition of a likely voter poll that they voted in the last election and the election before.
No, that's a great point, because we wonder, because if you have the majority of the party, the Democratic Party, that doesn't want Biden to run, and that's been the case for a while, are they more inclined to vote for someone other than Biden, which likely wouldn't be Trump? Some of them may. There might be a few Democrats who vote for Trump. We'll see. Or would they be more likely to vote or not vote at all and stay home? Which means historically they're a likely voter, but this round is building more and more for them to stay home. We'll see.
Now, in the same poll that the tracking poll of Biden's popularity, which was all voters, they claim that the same poll, ABC News, they took registered voters sample only.
Yeah, I was seeing that
for Biden, and they have him up +1.
Right.
I don't buy that you're down 22 points and you're beating Trump. I just don't buy that.
No, I don't buy that. I would really love to see the likely voter on that.
I don't buy that your negative approval rating is so incredibly high, yet you're beating Trump right now based on where all the polls have shown they're going over the last month.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you look at the breakdown of the qualifiers. Thinking ahead. Well, here's one of the questions from that actual poll. Thinking ahead, how likely are you to vote in the presidential election in November? All right. Absolutely certain to vote, 60. Probably will vote, 11. Chances are 50-50, 8. Less likely than that, 21. So get into the likely voters, and you start then paring down. And I think you're right on that. You still have to put an asterisk by that because voter apathy is a real thing, and this election cycle has the makings of plenty of voter apathy on the left. There will be some on the right that don't want to vote for Trump. They're not going to vote for anybody else, and there's the never Trumpers or never again for Trump or however you want to categorize them. But I think it's I know get Bill Kristol on the phone, ask him what they call themselves these days. But I mean, the dynamic is huge on the left, and it's because we look at the polls that show us. Again, of the party, the Democratic Party, the majority of them didn't want him to be the guy, didn't want him to be the nominee. And the left sees it. The Democrats know it. This silly excuse making, oh, look, he's more vibrant. He's got the vigor of a 25-year-old. No, he doesn't. No. And, the economy's doing great. Nothing's wrong with the economy. Okay. This is, the delusional state that you have to slide into to try and defend the guy. And they know over and over again. They know. And so get into the likely voters. And I really would love to see a poll like that. Focused on that. The very first question from this ABC News poll on qualifiers. I'd love to see that for Democrats, just the Democrats, that have been likely voters. How would you weight your chance of or probability of voting this November? Are you giving any consideration to staying home? I would love to see. Nobody's going to do it. I don't think anyone's going to do it, but I would love to see those numbers.
Well, even in the ABC poll, when you see the disparity on the issues, and you're like, okay, all right, because some of the polls are showing, the majority of the polls are moving more in the direction that, and we've seen it, and we mentioned this last week, when you actually say Trump's economy, you're not saying pre-COVID economy, you're actually putting the Trump word in. And the one thing that I noticed last week, and I made a statement, I said, are we to the point where the Trump name is not automatically toxic? Because they do relate it to the, you had the PBS reporter out there saying she just couldn't believe how people look back at the Trump economy and are, because they're scared. It's an NPR reporter, but couldn't believe, was blown away by how many Democrats talked about how the economy was better under Trump. You can't have inflation for over 3 solid years where you can make the case that the things that you actually need to buy, not inflation overall, but the things that you need to buy, core inflation and then super core inflation that probably, depending on where you live in the country, has gone up between 25 and 40%. You can't make the case that that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
You can't be shocked over that.
Right.
And I know people are saying, well, it's 19. That's all products. We look at things like the super core inflation and the core inflation. And the super core inflation really is telling because that's skyrocketed through the roof, and that's the things that people have to buy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you have to buy it, you have no choice. So that's where you're really feeling the impact. And the majority of the analysis I've seen is anywhere between 25 and 40%. When you look at car insurance, when you look at homeowners insurance, when you look at the cost of if you wish to buy a home, when you look at where energy has gone and electricity has gone, when you look at the foodstuffs that people actually buy, it's much greater than the regular inflation rate, which is all products.
Yeah. Right.
But as we said, the full impact on any individual is the things that you have no choice in buying and you have to buy. And to ignore that fact and just simply say, the economy's doing great, you look and sound like an idiot when you do that.
Yep.
That's a huge problem for the Democrats. But when you see there's such a disparity in the actual issues, and the ABC poll shows that Biden would win by 1, you're like, something doesn't make sense when you have him down. His approval rating is minus 22.
Right.
His core approval rating is minus 27.
Yeah.
I don't buy the poll.
I don't buy that at all.
866-90 Red Eye.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Trump trial. We'll have the latest on that. Here's what I love. You see the Chicago Teachers Union demands a $50 billion contract.
No. All right.
By the way, that's the budget, I believe, close to the budget of the state of Illinois.
Yeah.
But the Chicago Teachers Union is demanding $50 billion with provisions including free abortion services, cash to illegal immigrants, LGBTQ concessions, and a big pay hike, all despite falling student enrollment and worsening student proficiency rates. The contract, the CTU is set to present demands a 9% annual raise through 2028, even though the average salary of a teacher in Chicago public schools is already $93,000, which is about $20,000 a year more than the average pay of a teacher in the rest of the state makes. The pay hike would make Chicago teachers some of the highest paid in the country and would ultimately set them at an annual rate of $144,000 by 2027. The annual salary would also put Chicago teachers at nearly double the median household income of the city of Chicago. As Fox News noted, to put the $50 billion contract the teachers want in context, the total amount of taxes that the entire state of Illinois earned in 2023 was $50.7 billion.
Which had the union respond by saying, "Oh, did we say 50 billion? We meant 50.7 billion."
The contract also demands the city pay for annual retraining for teachers on LGBTQ issues to continue qualifying to be able to teach. Other radical demands on gay issues in the contract include a demand
conform
that the city build a gender-neutral bathroom in every state. By the way, that's discriminatory, is it not?
Yeah, it is.
By the Democrat standard.
Right.
And they want a new rule prohibiting teachers from telling parents if kids are being transgendered in schools. The CTU is also demanding that the school or the city give every migrant student a check for $2,000 to spend on transportation costs, mental health counseling, and help with academics. Meanwhile, in February, it was reported that 55 of Chicago public schools had 0 children who were grade level proficient in reading and math. That's reasonable. Sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah. They've earned it. Wow.
You know, you see this here and you see how they're going crazy. It's almost as if they realize it's all coming to an end.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
We just need to go absolutely ape manure.
Yeah. Let's make sure we lock in a contract here before all this thing implodes.
Same thing that looks like with the auto workers.
Right. Yeah.
You know, we're getting these subsidies. Let's get as much as we can
get them in.
from the taxpayer.
Get them in.
And before it all crumbles beneath us, because our union leadership has been pushing for EVs for years.
Yep.
The union leadership has been working against our best interests. So the best thing union leaders can do is, well, let's become popular for the next couple of years and basically convince the government to support and the auto companies to support our contract, because everybody is getting the subsidy from the taxpayer.
Yeah.
And we need to continue it. The automobile companies want them because it will help lessen the loss of EVs. And then the union claims, well, we want part of that cash from the taxpayer.
Yep.
Taxpayer, you're being screwed every which way.
Yep. And, of course, as we mentioned earlier, now Fannie and Freddie, how about backing second mortgages?
Yeah.
Wow.
Get our Red Eye Radio app in your app store. Then listen at your convenience. Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Sorry, I was choking there.
You okay?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Sorry, it was
All right.
not choking bad, just choking a little.
Okay.
All right, let's get to the latest from the Trump trial from Friday, and the only reason we bring it up is simply to get the analysis of somebody like Andrew McCarthy, who goes through all the legal aspects of it. And so here he was on Fox News. I believe it was Saturday morning. Here we go.
Morning. Let's focus in. A lot of people are talking about this testimony from Hope Hicks that Donald Trump would have wanted to shield his family from these allegations around Stormy Daniels. Now, this was a prosecution's witness. They called Hope Hicks. Do you see it as a big problem? Because Alvin Bragg's big case is that this is a federal case because Donald Trump was attempting to manipulate a federal election. That's why he was trying to hide whatever was going on with Stormy Daniels. Now here comes Hope Hicks saying, no, he was trying to shield his wife.
Well, it could have that impact. I mean, she said things that would be helpful to both sides. But I think, we're looking at how the emotion of the witness may sway the jury one way or the other, how, like, one after another of these people who come in say uncomplimentary things about Cohen. The prosecutors have already basically told the jury that Cohen's a liar and he's not a very reputable person, and they think they can win the case on the documents. The most important thing here is the judge's impact on the jury, and that's what I'm more concerned about than the witnesses. I mean, the fact of the matter is these non-disclosure agreements are completely legal, and Bragg has no legal authority to turn them into campaign finance violations, which they're not. But the judge is letting him do it. So unlike, our viewers here who get me or Kerry Kupek or John Turley or someone to come on every hour and explain how bad this is, what the jury's getting is what the judge is letting the prosecutors get away with. And I'm more worried about what the jury thinks than, just the emotional sways of the trial from witness to witness.
There you go. And that's why we go to him, because it's everybody's discussing the issues as if, well, they said Trump did this and then Trump. Yeah, but none of it's a crime.
Doesn't matter.
None of it's a crime. And if the judge is saying it's a crime and it's not a crime, that's why I think not only the prosecutor should face punishment, but the judge is completely and totally out of line in this case.
Yep. Yeah.
He's not following law
Nope.
at all.
No.
And I don't know how you punish a judge in this way, whether you impeach a judge, what you should, but this is just, the judge allowing this is just reprehensible.
And, the media coverage of it far too often, in fact, from the beginning, with most of the media coverage, it's as if something legitimate is happening here.
Yeah.
And it goes far beyond being a mockery of our justice system.
It's a dismantling of our
it really is
justice system.
It really is. We talked about how Bragg he's lying to the jurors. This is where the judge has an obligation to step in and say, you're implying that this is a charge, that this is a crime, this is a charge. All of this should have been thrown out from day one.
Right, which means the judge is lying to the jury.
The judge is allowing these lies to go on. You're part of the lie. Yeah. You're also lying.
He's allowing this trial to continue.
Yep, exactly.
Knowing that by law, none of this is a crime.
Right. From day one. I'm sorry. I fail to see any crime here. This case is dismissed. Gone. Bye.
Yep.
You're not going to waste the taxpayer money.
And we know it because I don't know still to this day, how long has this trial been on? Over 2 weeks? I don't know any Democrat that has come out and said this is the specific crime.
No.
That then you could look it up and say, okay, this is the crime and this is what he did, and it matches.
When the 34 counts came down, remember that day? The liberal media was scrambling. They were like, hey, anybody got anything? I mean, anybody see a crime here? That's what you always look for. You look for the liberal media to have each of them to have their own expert, their own resident expert on to say, okay, here's the crime. Here's when he broke that crime. According to these indictments, here's the crime he committed. And you can't even get close to a crime here.
No, you can't.
And over again, they keep covering it like this is some legitimate situation.
And this is going to get blown out of an appeal that's going to get blown out, but the whole point is they don't care.
No. Nope.
And that's the problem. This is the problem. And this is why, you look at this, because it's not just in one trial. It's in a bunch of different trials against this president that they're making up crimes that aren't crimes. In the Georgia election case, now we see, and by the way, it's been online for a while, a bunch of the things coming down that, Julie Kelly, for example. I think she's with Real Clear Politics, have been pointing out the problems with Jack Smith and both January 6th and the documents case.
Mm-hmm.
And, you saw Trump going crazy saying that Smith ought to be in jail because apparently the chain of custody of many of these documents now are in question, and the manipulation of the prosecution with that, and so that's a huge. In every case, there's major, huge problems that are obvious that in any other case these things would have never been brought.
Yeah,
ever.
Right.
To try, because there is no crime, and that's the problem. Here is, and this should be a worry to people in this country, that when you have rogue prosecutors and rogue judges that are breaking the law, that are going after an ex-president who is the lead right now in the polls, leads the polls to be the next president of the United States and has already been president of the United States, and their only goal is election interference, you ought to be worried as a country big time.
Yep. Yeah, this is something where we pointed out over the years, this is not some grand conspiracy. This is the similar mindset that's at play with all of these Democrats who are in positions of power. They're abusing that power by doing what they're doing. And we can all see it. You know, when the thing came down with Colorado removing him from the ballot, there were a few Democrats that said, hey, look, sorry, you don't get to do this. We don't like the guy. We're not going to vote for the guy. You don't get to do this. How come we're not seeing more Democrats, at least, you know, a few Democrats looking at this Bragg case, looking at the Georgia case, and saying, sorry, there's no crime here with this Bragg case, and this does not constitute RICO in the Georgia case. You're not seeing anything. And I guess you just sit back and make the popcorn and watch it play out while their own candidate is failing miserably.
Here it is. This is Jonathan, this is Andrew McCarthy in National Review, adding on to what he said on Fox. Understand most criminal cases in the United States do not take 2 weeks to try. There are a lot of long trials, too, but to get to this stage of the proceedings and still have the subject matter of the case unaddressed is highly unusual.
Yeah.
You still haven't addressed what's the crime after 2 weeks.
Right.
That's because the case is not about what the case is about. That's why I'm not sure how effective, how effective anything would be. Judge Merchant has helped prosecutors frame the trial as a conspiracy case, specifically a conspiracy to steal the 2016 election by suppressing politically damaging information, allegations of extramarital affairs, supposedly in violation of campaign finance law. I don't want to further belabor the record regarding how there is no conspiracy charge in the indictment, how there is no such conspiracy statute in New York law, how Bragg has no authority to enforce federal campaign law, how the statute actually charged in the indictment gives him no such authority under New York constitutional law, and how even if Bragg arguably had jurisdiction to enforce federal campaign law, the so-called hush money payments based on lawful non-disclosure agreements were not campaign expenditures for which the law mandated disclosure. These points may end up being more germane on appeal, which, if Trump gets convicted, could take a year or more to process. In here and now, what matters is how the jury is perceiving the case under the influence of Judge Merchant, who is lying to them. I added the line, by the way.
Yeah, right.
The jury is not getting, or at least instructed to avoid, media commentary on the case. Merchant is letting Bragg's prosecutors present the case as if the charge were conspiracy to suppress politically damaging information, and he slaps down Trump's lawyers when they try to object. You'd have to think the jurors are seeing the case as Bragg and Merchant want them to see it. On that score, the Trump defense continued to cast aspersions on Cohen throughout the week. This is a cognitive dissonance of the Trump defense. The former president's lawyers are trying to stress to the jury that the NDAs are legal, despite the judge undermining this true assertion by letting prosecutors tell the jury that the payments were illegal under federal campaign law. Yet the Trump team is simultaneously straining to distance Trump from the payments, maintaining that Cohen was acting as a free agent. Again, if the defense is that the payments were legal, it is not logical to intimate that this was Cohen's sordid business and that Trump is uninvolved, which is a great point. It also is a real high wire act, given that Trump's lawyers know that the evidence will show that Trump reimbursed Cohen for laying out the $130K to pay Stormy, and that the jury last week heard Pecker's testimony regarding Trump asking about McDougal, whom Pecker had paid. The problem is with all of this is, again, the judge is lying to the jury.
Yeah.
That's why I believe the judge should be impeached, disbarred, whatever.
Yep.
Because it's reprehensible what is happening here. They are not following the law of New York or the law of the United States of America.
No,
They're making it up, and the judge is allowing it and telling the jury that something is illegal that isn't illegal.
Right.
As we always say to any Democrat, please tell us where we're wrong, and we know you can't, because the facts are with us.
Yep. It's just not, there's no way to get there. You know you can't debate what we just said.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Coming up, is it the wave of populism that is changing many Democrats and independents? We'll get to that coming up. Fantastic article to consider some of these polling numbers out there. We will get to that in just a little bit. And I love this article that came out again when you look at the election and what might happen. The article from, where was this? Market Insider, Inflation is Scrambling Americans' Perceptions of Middle-Class Life. And talking about people that make well into six figures in California can't make it.
Right.
They just can't make it.
Right.
Even though they thought they'd get to six figures and their life would be fine. Cost of living, one guy they talk about in Santa Barbara, California, cost of living is 65% higher than the rest of the nation.
Yeah, it's, again, when we measure, and this has been going on now for a while, the U.S. Census Bureau started measuring poverty differently because they adhere to the Gary McNamara principle, and it's not about what you make, it's about what you make compared to what you have to spend, the cost of living. And when they started doing that, then California rose to the top in terms of poverty. And now to the point of you can be making six figures and still be underwater in California.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the planet, we are Red Eye Radio. Welcome and good morning. I'm Gary McNamara. He is Eric Harley. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So I'm reading this here from Market Insider.
All
right. Which is from Business Insider, okay?
Right.
Which is a liberal publication.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're a liberal economic. I just love I love in a capitalist society, it's like we always talk about CNBC. You have socialists, many socialists analyzing capitalism.
Yeah.
But this article, Inflation is Scrambling Americans' Perceptions of Middle-Class Life. Scrambling America's perceptions. Many Americans have come to feel that a middle-class lifestyle is out of reach, blaming inflation for bringing down the mood and making the economy seem much worse than it is. Money experts say people feel downbeat, and that and should be creating a financial plan to alleviate stress. Vincent, a 29-year-old medical sales rep, makes $130,000 a year. It was a dream when he was younger. Once he was making six figures, he assumed he'd be in financial nirvana, worry-free, off on vacation somewhere at least once a year, perhaps able to buy a home in the not-too-distant future. I was like, if I could just make six figures, I would have a nice life. I could save up a down payment for a home. I could start beginning my life. Vincent, who preferred to use only his first name to protect his privacy. He was surprised to find out that in Santa Barbara, a coastal California city, where the cost of living is 65% higher than the national average, he's barely able to save for anything.
And we believe he can't afford a last name.
That's probably it, right? It's
too expensive.
Making $130,000 in California, he has to remain anonymous. He doesn't have any plans on paying their 11 or is it 13% state income tax?
Right, exactly.
He said he's barely able to save for anything, let alone buy a house, plan for kids, or hit other milestones of middle-class life. Bigger ticket items that our parents could have bought, like a home or a car, that is just to me out of reach, said Vincent, though he acknowledged his budget could go further in a city with a lower cost of living. Well, duh.
Well, yeah.
I would have to save $10,000 for 6 or 7 years straight and really sacrifice to put down on maybe the dumpiest thing I could find here. Vincent's experience is what has become of the middle class American dream, with many earning well into six figures, but feeling like they're way behind the curve, or that the economic chips are not chips. Not chicks.
Mm-hmm.
Chips are stacked against them.
Yeah.
Some of these concerns are real. What the hell are you talking about? Some of the concerns are real.
Which ones aren't real?
Some of these concerns are real. See the widely expensive U.S. housing market, while other experts say it may be a matter of perception versus reality, as the economy feels tough, even as earnings are growing and employment is strong. They're doing the exact same thing that every liberal publication does.
You're too stupid to see it?
Why is the cost of living 65% higher in Santa Barbara, California than anywhere else?
Cost of government.
Regulations, cost of government.
Mm-hmm.
End of story. Vincent is among a growing group of middle-class Americans, most recently defined in 2022 by the Pew Research Center as households earning between $48,000 and $145,000 who don't feel they can afford to live a traditional middle-class life, replete with a home and a comfortable environment. According to a senior research analysis at Redfield and Wilton, inflation has caused many Americans to ignore the overall strength of the U.S. economy. Are you people idiots or what? It doesn't.
You know, everybody's focused on this inflation thing. They can't see the great economy. That's what they just said there.
I know. They're idiots. They're absolute idiots.
Listen, look, we want to talk to our audience. Listen, we love you guys.
Yes, okay, yes.
But you need to stop. Stop complaining about the inflation and focus on this great economy. See, you're just focused on the negative. You got to accentuate the positive. I don't want to break into a musical here because I hate musicals, number one. And number two, you just need to get over it.
Well, why doesn't somebody ever say, as we've said 100 times, this is why, 100 times, 1,000 times probably in the last couple of years, why is inflation worse than a recession?
Because it hits everybody.
Right. A recession, you can have 10% unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
when you have 10% unemployment, 90% of the people that wish to be employed are still employed.
Yep.
When you have that kind of thing happen and you have a recession at that point because the economy may be in negative growth and you have layoffs, may see 10% unemployment, 90% of people have jobs, and because you have fewer people with buying power, prices go down.
And the compounding effect of inflation, it's
Right.
It keeps going and going and going, and then adds to the cost of other items along the way, which creates a whole new basis for inflation if you don't get on top of it. So it goes, in this case, and we saw it in the 70s, if you don't get serious about it, it goes on for far too long. A recession rarely does that.
And inflation is caused by government policy.
Yep.
I just love this here. Chris Collins, wealth advisor at Northwestern Mutual's Collins Financial, he suspects that most middle-class Americans feel anxious about their financial situation due to financial shock fatigue, the exhaustion of navigating one big economic shock after another, as well as a lack of financial planning. That may be true there. But the financial planning may also be true. As a former bill collector, I know that most people do not have a financial plan. And that's a bad thing. You should. But the exhaustion of navigating one big economic shock after another, which is caused by whom? Government. It's very easy. And I just love, it's sort of this whole thing about the Democrats do the same thing. Liberals do the same thing on everything. Well, the inflation's hurting people. Why don't they see how great the economy is? And that, hey, look at this. They're working 2 jobs. Why aren't they happy that they're working 2 jobs and still underwater on their bills because they can't keep up with super core inflation and core inflation and even regular inflation?
Look at all the jobs Biden's creating out of necessity for, things like surviving.
TikTok user Jessica in Alabama said she believed the middle class was dying. She pointed to her eldest daughter, who says she worked 60 hours a week during her pregnancy to provide for her family. Do we even have a middle class anymore? Is it just the haves or have-nots? Because the haves are having and the have-nots are struggling. So who do you blame? What is liberalism trying to do now? It's the billionaires' fault for the situation that you're in today.
Again, they have. Don't use the word earn. That would be wrong. They have, and you have not. That's the problem. It's the billionaires. It must be the rich. It can't be government policy that's driving this insanity on every level.
51% of respondents in a Northwestern Mutual survey said inflation was the biggest obstacle to financial security, while 67% of households in the survey said their income was falling behind the cost of living. That's making people feel locked out of the many of the milestones long associated with middle-class life. 74% of middle-class Americans have cut back on non-essential spending. A full half of Americans surveyed said they didn't plan on going on a summer vacation due to the high cost of living. 60% of Americans say they don't think they're saving enough to comfortably retire.
Yeah.
46% of middle-class Americans said they've dialed back or completely paused saving for the future, and 38% said they didn't think they could afford an unexpected expense over $1,000. The anxieties about things like owning their own home, going to college, all these things that the majority of Americans perceive as being sort of indicators of middle-class status, many of them now don't think those things are attainable to them. Whose fault is inflation? Government policy. Everything associated with what middle-class Americans state they feel is the biggest problem comes, or those that are trying to become middle-class Americans but don't believe they can, come from what? Liberalism. All of it.
This idea that we can get by on this over and over again with spending more than we have. Over and over again. By the way, this sentiment, this poll is showing exactly what I talked about last week or week before. And that is the problem that you run into. Because if you believe you're never going to get beyond this point, if you believe this is the new normal of being underwater all the time, it takes away your drive.
Yeah.
You believe, I'm never going to be making enough money to whatever it might be. It's going to take away your drive, your initiative. And if you look at innovation, which is one of the ways that you expand wealth, and that innovation is stifled when you have everyone's creativity in a situation like this stifled by the idea of, well, it's not going to get any better.
We start talking about the numbers, for example, inflation overall, 19% roughly over the last couple of years is what it's risen. And then we say, okay, let's look at core inflation and super core inflation, which are things that you actually have to buy, not just the inflation number of all the millions of products out there, but you take the 30 products that you must buy each and every day, the products you must have, everything from car insurance, home insurance, cost of cars, loans, whatever, food, of the things that you actually buy in stores, and it's between 25 and 40%. Now, check this one out. Americans need 80% more than they did. They need to earn 80% more than they did before the pandemic to comfortably afford a home, a recent Zillow report found. In 4 years.
That's such a massive
80%
jump.
more. First-time home buyers, meanwhile, made up less than a third of all home purchases in 2023, one of the lowest shares ever recorded, according to the National Association of Realtors.
Right. You go back to the mid to late 80s, that was a much larger share. And so what is it? It's people who have equity in one home. It's older folks like us, quite often, that want to move. You have the ability to do that. You may have full equity in a home. You sell your home, and then you use that cash to buy another home. And the first-time home buyer is dwindling away. I mean, the thing is right now, and look, there has to be a turnaround at some point. We have to get back to the expansion of wealth. I believe we will do that. I can't tell you when that's going to be. But one of the steps in getting there, and in fact, it's a number of steps, is we have to make the choices differently. These individuals are elected by us that make these choices to do these things. All of this is a choice. This isn't some massive natural disaster that happened. These were choices along the way that continue to go in the same direction every time, now to the point of Fannie and Freddie again. We're talking Fannie and Freddie again, wanting to secure second mortgages.
Well, that's the problem that they have, and this is what Democrats are hoping for. And this is why we have said the Republicans need to come out with a campaign message. I've seen them actually, some say this, but I haven't seen it as a consistent campaign message, that the Democrats and the president cannot and will not solve the problems we have today because they cause the problems.
Yep.
But what you have is you have some people out there looking at it and saying, things are so bad, I need more government help, more government help. Well, all the government spending of all the government help is what created the situation you're in. And then you get in that circle of doom, of financial doom, where we keep doing the same exact thing over and over again because people need something immediately. So we destroy the future by borrowing way over what we can borrow in order to keep people satisfied today as we make the future worse.
That immediate gratification. Got to have it now. Can't wait. Not going to work. Not going to do the work to get it done. I want it now, and the government is the answer.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on speed and space management. In order to manage speed, you need to understand the 4 factors involved in stopping a vehicle. Perception distance is the distance a vehicle travels from the time you see a hazard until your brain recognizes it. The perception time for an alert driver is approximately 3/4 of a second. Reaction distance is the distance a vehicle travels from the time your brain tells your foot to move from the accelerator until your foot hits the brake pedal. The average driver has a reaction time of 3/4 of a second. Brake lag distance also needs to be taken into account. When operating a vehicle with air brakes, it takes about half a second for the mechanical operation to take place. Finally, braking distance is the distance it takes a vehicle to stop once the brakes are applied. Braking distance is affected by the weight, length, and speed of the vehicle, as well as road condition. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Coming up on the bottom of the hour, I found some other really interesting polling. This is probably a huge problem for Democrats here, and it was a new poll that was out that tested policies associated with Biden and Trump. And they noticed that one example, and this is where the populist movement is coming in, that those that believe in some of the, biggest government support of medical issues, which you would view as more left a few years ago, correct?
Yeah.
Now are some of the biggest supporters of Trump's immigration policies. That those that believe that the government should be funding a ton more in medical care also want to really clamp down on the southern border. And when you see some of these numbers, you're going to go, whoa, because they're numbers that blow your mind away when you look at it. So we'll get to that coming up here in just a little bit. Enough is enough. One university president speaks out against trans athletes in women's sports. By the way, Biden said over the weekend he had a tweet out there saying, we need to support women. It was like, shut up. What are you talking about? Support women? You're the one that promotes the misogynistic viewpoint that men should replace women in sports. Wow.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. We've talked about Roy Teixeira before, a lifelong Democrat who actually went to work for a conservative think tank because he said, I can't express anything that differs from the narrative in any liberal think tank anymore. And so we had mentioned him and also Douglas Schoen a couple of weeks ago. What were they talking about? What did they both agree on? It was something about Biden.
They were talking about what the Democrats should do, what they should promote. One of them was talking about how they should promote building a wall.
Yes, that was Douglas Schoen. But they were saying, both of them basically saying that for the Democrats to win, they have to support MAGA solutions.
Yeah.
And we were just like, wow. Well, Teixeira, who I think he created the Liberal Patriot, they did a poll. Okay. Now, this was a poll of over 4,000 voters. And here's what they found, all right?
All right.
And this shows you how the country is changing in more of a populist way. The strongest issues for Biden were generally around proposals that was government support of health care. Here's one example, was increasing the number of prescription drugs that Medicare can negotiate the price for seniors. All right? That proposal was supported by 81% of voters, with just 6% supporting, or 6% opposed. So that's 75 points net support. Okay?
All right.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Increase the number of prescription drugs that Medicare can negotiate the price of seniors. So seniors pay less for prescription drugs. Those who supported that proposal also supported using existing presidential powers to stop illegal immigrants crossing at the U.S.-Mexican border by 57 points, 72-15. Supporters of more Medicare price negotiations on prescription drugs also supported deputizing the National Guard and local law enforcement to assist with rapidly removing gang members and criminals living illegally in the United States by 46 points, 67-21. Nor do these Medicare price negotiation supporters blink at the idea that we should restrict the ability of migrants who illegally cross the U.S.-Mexico border to seek asylum by 40 points, 63-23. Some of the proposals on dealing with illegal immigration also generate solid support among those favoring strong Medicare role on prescription drug prices. For example, these pro-Medicare populists favor the idea that we should simply, quote, round up undocumented immigrants, detain and deport them to their home countries by 34 points, 58-24. The pro-Medicare populists also favor building a full wall on the U.S.-Mexico border by 20 points, 56-36. They even would think it would be a good idea to change federal law so that drug traffickers can receive the death penalty 55-35. Among supporters of increased Medicare role in prescription drug pricing, we also find overwhelming support for increasing funding for police and strengthening criminal penalties for assaulting cops, 72-17. Pro-Medicare populists net oppose requiring companies to sell more electric vehicles after 2030, 45-40. They also narrowly are in favor of repealing subsidies for clean energy and electric vehicles, 41-40. I also looked at another super popular Biden healthcare idea requiring pharmaceutical companies to charge American consumers the lowest price they charge customers in foreign countries, and the relating super popular proposal, protect Medicare and Social Security from funding cuts or increases in the age of eligibility. You see the exact same pattern. Voters who support these populist ideas overwhelmingly want a much tougher approach to illegal immigration. And I know why. This isn't hard to figure out. Reality's finally hitting. Illegal immigrants cost us. Give the money to us, not to illegal immigrants.
Yep. Something we've seen going back years, that once it's become very clear how much we're spending and how many are here, and we've seen that play out. Remember the caravans that were coming across the border years ago? Well, now it's at an astronomical rate, and you're seeing it play out in all the major cities, and the media is covering it. And the sentiment is very clear by the American people. Fix the border. And I don't think this is going to, you're not going to see any of this turn around for a while. Look at that with the EV mandates. Because it's very simple. The market saturation on EVs, we're hitting that point right now. We're at that threshold. And people are looking at it going, well, wait a minute, 2030 isn't that far away. If you're talking about forcing me to buy a car, I can't afford a gasoline car right now. And you want me to buy an EV? No. No, that's being rejected over and over again. We have to make these choices deliberately, though. At election time, we have to make these choices. We have to send a loud message. Let's see if we do that. Let's see if we send a different set of messages, and it has to be everything. Everything is broken. So everything we do this November has to be on all of that stuff that is broken, and it has to be a loud message. Let's see if that happens.
He writes here the Democrats would appear to need all the help they can get. The immigration healthcare nexus reviewed here suggests they may be leaving votes on the table by failing to take strong action on illegal immigration. Well, where Mr. Teixeira has it wrong is they created the problem at the border. It's not about solving the problem on illegal immigration.
No.
It's the fact that they created the problem at the border.
Yep.
He still doesn't mention that, which takes it to even a higher level. Which because people know that. Because when it came out, when remember, even in the very beginning, when he tried to blame Trump, it's like, no, Americans blame him. They blame him for what's going on at the border.
Yeah.
If he did come out and say, okay, executive order now to stop it, it would be obvious he's trying to get reelected. And Republicans would have a very strong argument to say for 3 years he did this till 3 months before an election or 4 months before an election or whenever it would be. And he's doing it to get your vote. Don't buy into it. They'll go right back to it. Plus, you're not going to solve the problem of inflation.
No, there's not. There are too many things right now that you're not going to reverse. Well, first of all, they're not going to start deporting millions and millions and millions of people between now and November. You're not going to see that. So what do you see? Well, you're going to see the situation in all these blue cities. That's going to keep playing out the way it's been playing out. That locals are having to deal with it. Local mayors. Mayor Brandon in Chicago, the mayor in Denver, all these mayors that have to deal with their town being a border town now, and they have to decide along with their city councils how much money they're going to spend on housing. Remember when they were talking about it, it was beginning of the year. They had put a sunset on some of the benefits for some of the immigrants in Chicago. And they said, well, wait a minute, your sunset's mid-February. You can't be seen politically, you can't be seen as putting people on the street in mid-February in Chicago. So they kicked it down the road, I think, another 30 days. Well, they're having to deal with this over and over and over again. And as you said, people are looking at this going, wait a minute, why aren't you spending money in our neighborhoods on us? Now, you and I have talked about, all right, there's the concern and problem with that kind of thinking that, well, if they don't spend the money there, they're going to spend it over here. It doesn't work that way, but it doesn't matter. That's the perception of people. They look at that saying, you need to focus on the problems here at home. And overall, they're absolutely right in where the focus needs to be. You look at the situation of the border and what it's created and the chaos that it's created. And I don't know how long it takes to reverse. I really don't. I mean, this is massive. It's just like massive inflation. Not only is everything broken, we're setting new records on things like inflation for a generation, immigration, all these things. The border is broken at a rate where I don't remember this. Having grown up on the southern border, I don't remember it ever being this bad. And it's because of the policy of the United States led by this president. When he campaigned to be president, he said, come here, we want you here. Even if you were deported during the Trump years, come back, we want you here. And what did they do? They responded exactly in the way that he asked them to.
And so that's, when we look at this election and we say that's why there's so many variables here. When you have that much support, the greatest support that you have for, Medicare and more support from the government for Medicare, which is more government spending, that you look at that and you say, okay, that would be more probably liberals. One of the things you look at is if you say that the government should drastically, negotiate with Medicare patients, and that may be different because you're talking about seniors to lower the prices. But overall, that's what the government's been doing. They want the pharmaceutical industry to lower the price of all pharmaceuticals, which then you wonder. I mean, there was a story that really hit over the last couple of weeks about that high school football coach from Wisconsin died because he could not get chemotherapy. It didn't exist. Shortages. Got it for a while, then didn't get it. And when you talk about these are drugs that are used last stages of cancer to hopefully try to cure you, and they don't get into the specifics of it, I guarantee it's if they could make money off it, they'd be making it. But if you can't make money off of it and you're never going to get back what you put in for research and development, you're not going to sell it.
Well, if they're losing money all the time, they won't be in existence. There won't be anybody around to do the R&D.
And we know that from Canada, the shortage. We've been going back, neck cancers and stuff like that. You go back 10 years when we were talking about Obamacare and everything else and the lack of shortage of cancer drugs for rare cancers that happen up there. It's like we don't make enough of it. We can't make a profit. We have to negotiate with the government to produce it, which means we don't sell it here.
Right.
Which means if you get this particular type of neck cancer, you have to go to the United States. The drug isn't available. That's the whole lesson. Nothing is free. But it's the fact that if you've got the majority of the people who say, we want more government support of Medicare, and those same people are landslide numbers for deporting illegal immigrants, that's a problem for Democrats. 866-90-RED-I.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Interesting article I'm reading. Will Donald Trump blow this election like he did 2020, stating that the Democrats should be extremely optimistic because the polling numbers of where Biden is on the issues compared to Trump is mind-boggling. The numbers, yet he's not that far away from Trump in the actual head-to-head or the polls, that he should be down by 20 in the polls, and since he's not, that's the optimism that they see for Democrats.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.